our synergies and all of our dealers and all their fabricators and merging everything together. It's been really not a bad deal, because really when you think about it, sinks and faucets with tops, marble or otherwise, goes hand in hand, and we weren't in them. We could use both each other in gaining better market share with customers. And plus customers just, again, eliminating one more vendor, it helps you guys, helps everyone. So without further ado, I'll introduce Tom to go over the Eclipse stuff with us.
Hi, I'm Tom Robinson with A&O Inc. We're the Midwest distributor of Eclipse. I understand that stainless steel is not a real exciting topic, so I'll try to make this as short as possible. 2.5, 3 hours max.
You're fired.
Awesome. We'll be out of pizza by then.
Okay, in your thingies here, I gave you a little synopsis of this. The sink is kind of an afterthought most times. The flooring, the cabinets, the countertop, all the ingredients that go into it, but it's an important decision, because if you cut that hole in the, particularly if you have a granite or marble or something that you can't just take out and change, you cut that hole, and if the sink goes bad, you're stuck with it, and the only thing you can do is bring in another bad sink to go with it. Eclipse are designed to go with granite and marble and hard surface countertops. For many years we didn't even have a drop-in. We've come up with a drop-in recently. Ours are made to last a generation, just like the granite. The curse of the granite industry right now is the free sink. A lot of people are giving away a free sink, and pretty much you get what you pay for with a free sink. We'll get into a little bit about certification and the sinks a little later, but free sinks are worth what you pay for them. Stainless steel. Everybody heard of 304 stainless. 304 is the optimum grade of steel to use for stainless steel sinks. 200 series. You've probably seen the old drop-in ones that the home builders put in your laminate tops. When you're taking them out, they're yellow, they're brown, they're dented, they're just not very good. That's because they're made of 202 stainless. It's much softer material. 202 stainless does not currently meet building codes anywhere in the country where you use international building codes. And we'll discuss that a little further later on. But a lot of the new ones are 202 because they're free. 400 series is knives, surgical tools. It's too hard to make. You can't press a stainless steel out of it. So 300 series and 304 is the optimum. You've probably heard of 18.8 or 1810. 1810 is, the 18% is 18% chromium. The definition of stainless steel is 11% chromium. You probably have a hammer at home that's made out of stainless steel. And stainless steel, by the way, is a misnomer. Stainless steel will stain, it will not rust. Okay. Once you put 11% chromium in your iron, it will not rust. Also, if you put a magnet up against it, the magnet won't stick to it. Okay. To get the shine and luster, you need 18% chromium. Okay, that's what makes it shiny. Then you have to add nickel. Nickel hardens the finish so it lasts. You've all seen brand new sinks. You put them in, they're kind of dull, they're not shiny. Now, I don't mean a shiny like a mirror finish. I mean shiny like the steel is shiny. This is shiny. Okay? Now, if you hold this up to the free sinks, most of the free sinks, you'll see a marked difference. All by themselves, it's not as obvious, but they're cutting on the chromium. Now, by far, the most expensive ingredient in this chromium nickel content is the nickel. So if people are cutting corners, that's where they're cutting it first. So then what that means is your sink may look beautiful the day you put it in, but it's going to turn yellow or brown over time and no longer match the beautiful stainless steel sink, faucet that you bought for me.
Is this, you hear like 18 gauge, so.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Oh. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, ask questions anytime, but we will get to 18 gauge. Okay? It's reverse order. 18 gauge is thinner than 16 gauge. So the lower the number, the thicker the gauge. The advantage of 16 gauge is it's quieter. When you turn on the tap water, you don't hear it. If you put an Eclipse sink in, silicone it, put the clips on, do it the way it's supposed to be done, it'll be as quiet as a porcelain sink. Now, some of the, who's seen the guys that have advertised about, oh, look at all the sound pads we put on it. They put them on the sides, the bottom, because they're cheating on the steel. Almost always, the more sound pads, the cheaper the steel. Okay? Now, 16 gauge.
Isn't that kind of overkill for residential?
Absolutely not. If you want it quiet, it's not. Okay, we'll get you there. Now, a lot of the cheap giveaway sinks are 20 gauge, 22 gauge.
Well,
They're made of
correct.
202. That's right, but it's hard to tell the difference. Okay, you can tell the difference on this because you see the E logo. It's a good sink.
All right.
Okay, we'll get into that further. Okay, I was at his place last week. The guy says, "Oh, I don't want to pay that. I got a $25 sink," and it looked, you know, it was cheap. It was already turning yellow and brown. I have a showroom in Illinois. They had oh, here's our free sink we get from our supplier. And I took our sink over there and I put it next to it. I said, if you can't sell the difference for $100, you know, you need to be in a new business. Now, here's the lie about 16 gauge sinks. A lot of the 16 gauge sinks, if you read the fine print, they're pressed from 16 gauge steel. In other words, they start from a 16 gauge piece of steel and press a sink out of it. Guess what happens? When you stretch it, it gets thinner. Okay, ours are pressed from heavier, so the finished product, it's like a quarter pounder before cooking. If you want a quarter pounder of hamburger, you better start with more than a quarter pound, so when it comes. The same thing, if you want a 16 gauge sink, you better start with heavier than 16 gauge to wind up with it. Many of the sinks that are sold as 16 gauge, and a number in town here, including the ones sold by the granite slab guys, their 16 gauge weighs less than our 18 gauge, so you tell me who's fooling who. So you got to be careful when it's 16 gauge, what is it? Now, there are also sinks that are heavy, but not shiny. Because they're heavy, they put lots of steel to make them real heavy, but they don't add the chromium and the nickel. So if a sink is $100 or less, you can't make the ingredients can't all be there. Okay? Now, so they have to be careful of that. There are, I used to say there's 3 ways to make a sink. There's at least 4 now that I'm aware of. The old-fashioned way, how many of you have seen a sink and it kind of around the edge is kind of has a beveled edge or it looks like a seam? That's a 3-piece sink where they make the top, they draw the 2 bowls and they weld it all together. Okay? That's the old-fashioned way. The biggest difficulty for that is they're not consistent. These guys go nuts trying to use it on a CNC machine because this one's a little bigger, that one's a little smaller, a little bigger, as there are a lot of these cheaper sinks. Our sinks are cold drawn. We draw 1 bowl, left bowl, right bowl, and then weld them together. If you turn, not this one, but if you turn most of our bowls upside down, you'll see a weld mark down the back. In the front, you won't see it because it's been ground. But the weld mark, now, we think that's the best way to make a sink. If you press both bowls at the same time, this is what's called an annealed sink. Okay? No weld mark down the back. The way they made this is they pressed it and heated it, pressed it and heated it, and pressed it and heated it. This is annealed sinks are lighter because the process makes them lighter. When you anneal it, you lose some of the nickel, which means your sink isn't quite going to, whether it'll last 100 years instead of 95 years, I'm not sure, but you lose some of the nickel in the process. And because you're doing a heat process, it's not as uniform. Now, there are people out there making cold drawn both bowls at the same time. When they do that, almost always you'll see a manufacturing defect in at least 3 or 4 of the corners and along the seams because they can't stretch it that far and get all the curves in it. So it's just not a good looking bowl.